Welcome to AI in Project Management and Transformation, the podcast by Effilix. Today, in this episode, we are excited to explore how AI is reshaping agile workflows, project management, business transformation. Today's guest is John Ege, an expert in agile program management who has led major transformation initiatives at companies like Red Hat and Clari. John, why don't you give us a hi, introduce yourself?
Hi, yeah. Like you said, my name's John Ege. I've worked at large enterprises like Red Hat, Splunk, as well as startup companies like SignalFX, later acquired by Splunk, and now at Clari as well. I've been in project management in one shape or another for 15 to 20 years, primarily in software projects.
That's amazing. Like you guys heard, John has extensive experience in optimizing agile processes, managing complex integrations, and improving project efficiency. Today, the conversation will cover key challenges in documentation, reducing reporting overhead, and how AI is making agile workflows more effective. So, to start off with this segment one, the documentation problem, finding a source of truth. One of the biggest struggles in agile and project management is documentation. Where is the single source of truth? How do you see the challenges playing out in real world projects? So, John, over to you. How do you think this entire complications which documentation adds to the process and struggles which employees and as well as leaders face in order to get everything in place?
Yeah, I think it always depends on the level of maturity of the company. When you're in the startup phase and you're able to have a team size that can be fed by two pizzas, there's oftentimes the problem of no documentation, but at first it's not a problem because you're dealing with such a small set of people that you have a small network of engineers are able to talk to each other and sort of have that tribal knowledge within the group. Um, it's problematic relatively quickly though as soon as the teams start to expand, and now you do need to start writing things down so new people can get onboarded onto the projects, onto the software, and to understand the code base. And that's when the problems really start in terms of either you have documentation but it's not consistent, either it's not in the same place, it's not of the same quality, and not necessarily geared to the growing audience as well, because at first the documentation is really there to service engineers, but soon it starts to you have the need to have that documentation service your support organization, your business organization, etc. So that becomes a problem. And then as you continue to mature and as you continue to grow, those problems can exacerbate if you don't do anything about it, as well as it can start becoming outdated as well as you start making changes to the system and aren't consistently updating your documentation, or you are updating your documentation but again in like inconsistent places, so suddenly it's hard to find out where the most up-to-date information and most accurate information is. So as maturation happens with the company, sort of the immature processes at the beginning stages of your company really start to stand out and slow things down and cause problems.
That's totally true. That's totally true. So, have you seen companies successfully solve this problem before, and how do they do?
The first thing is you do need to have a single source of truth, and really try to centralize your documentation in one place where it's you have clear guardrails and clear guidelines in terms of what's getting updated, how it's getting updated, and what the format of the updates are. So the first thing is you have to land on that single source of truth. I think the second thing is you have to make it part of your definition of done as you're making changes to the system, that you're updating the documentation that supports that system. And then regularly checking in to make sure that it's up to date, getting rid of documentation that's no longer consistent, etc. Like having regular check-ins, either in your retrospectives or as part of like tech debt cleanups, all that stuff. You need to have kind of a regular cadence to check in and make sure that your documentation is up to date. Or as you're finding problems, making sure that you're sort of resolving them and getting rid of out-of-date information.
So what do you think could be the strategies for balancing these lightweight documentation with probably effective knowledge sharing, or any other strategy which you think our listeners might try implementing?
I think the big thing is you want to make it part of your flow. You don't want it to be an alien part of your process or sort of a checkbox thing. You need to, if you're using GitHub, make it part of like when you're doing a PR review, like actually checking to see whether or not the documentation's part. Just make it a consistent daily activity, so it's not something where you're making a bunch of changes, and then 2 weeks, a month, 2 months later, you're checking to see what the deltas are between the changes you've introduced and the documentation that you've created. So trying to make it part of your regular flow of development.
And we've heard a lot of engineering team members telling that a ton of time goes just into this, documenting. Though they understand the importance behind it, a ton of time goes into it. So do you have any advice for them in terms of optimizing the use of time in order to get the documentations done?
Yeah, I think the AI has definitely made this a much easier and a much cheaper process in terms of being able to really use either ChatGPT or Copilot within GitHub or whatever to basically have boilerplate templates that are essentially just getting updated by the unique information that you're introducing into the system. I think really leaning on the AI tools to help you create the documentation saves a significant amount of time in terms of actually creating it. Because, writing documents is not necessarily why people wanted to become engineers. So I think figuring out how to use the AI tools that are coming online today to sort of take the work that you've already done and then translate it into documentation has been a major time saver, even for me, in terms of just being able to prompt with, here are the changes I've made, update the existing document, and kind of go on with my life and do the things that are truly valuable. I mean, documentation is absolutely valuable, but it's one of those, for some people, it's a real chore. So using all of the AI tools that are coming online to sort of make that chore much simpler and easier to do, and because it is an automated tool at the end of the day, there will be a lot more consistency as well. So as the organization grows, you're going to start seeing more consistency with the documentation if you're all sort of pulling into the same tool and same index.
Yeah, that makes sense. And with that said, I think we should move to the segment 2, which is reducing overhead in project reporting. So you added a lot of ideas how one could optimize, or the engineering team could optimize their time in order to get the documentations done. I'm more interested to understand what's the right balance between transparency and too much reporting.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem with project management and with reporting on the progress that teams are making is oftentimes it can be very expensive for the engineers and they don't see like an immediate value add in terms of them updating certain documents. So I think the one thing that I've tried to do is basically engineer keeps Jira up to date. For instance, if that's the tool you're using for project management, whatever tool you're using to sort of track progress, they update that tool, and from the engineer's perspective, they should essentially be done. And then project managers like me use that as the source to then report on progress using either the built-in tools for Jira, as well as there's all sorts of add-ons like Jellyfish, EasyBI, rich filters, etc., to sort of take their output and translate that into like a source of information to track trends, track progress, etc. So try to keep the reporting really on the technical program management side and not on the engineering side. So one, just try to have again single source of truth for the engineers to update their stuff, their progress, and then on the project management side, using that source of truth to essentially create all of the reporting, create all the transparency you need, but to try to really take the overhead load off of the engineering team as much as possible. That's on the engineering side, and then on the project management side, where things can get tricky, is okay, great, everything is in Jira, but the rest of the business outside of engineering, product and design, and sometimes even those organizations aren't necessarily in Jira. Translating that information into something that the rest of the business can digest. That usually turns into either PowerPoint or Google presentations, etc., that need to be updated, and those don't necessarily always play well with Jira or whatever technical tool you're using to track progress. So dealing with, and then oftentimes, just like there can often be proliferation on the engineering side as far as documentation, you have the exact same problem on the business side with your stakeholders. So also trying to consolidate the documentation as much as possible there, so you're not updating a bunch of different decks. You're trying to update one source so the business can digest what's going on, what's the progress, what's the value being added, etc., without it becoming expensive on the project management side to keep track of all the different places that you're reporting, or all the different places that the business is looking to track the progress of the engineering organization.
Got it, got it. That makes sense. That makes sense. So I'm curious, are there any reporting methods that actually drive better decision making?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, what you're trying to surface as a project manager is what's the progress, and if there are deadlines associated, if there's cost of delay, if there's prioritization decisions that need to be made, you need to be able to surface that up to the right business stakeholder, give them a clear idea of where things are at, what trade-offs are available, what are the things that we've already tried to do on the engineering side, and try to really give them as best information possible for them to make a data-driven decision as far as, we're going to prioritize this project or another, we're going to move these resources around to sort of enable this, we're going to turn up, we're going to budget this for some infrastructural need that the engineering team needs. there's all sorts of decisions that need to be made outside of the engineering organization or within the leadership part of the engineering organization that needs to bubble up from the teams, and then be able to surface it there, get the decision, and then obviously have processes to then let the teams know what the decisions are. So oftentimes that those decisions come from a couple of different places. There's what's currently happening with the engineering team, what's their velocity, what's the progress, when are they going to get done the things that are currently in their plate, and then there's typically what's the roadmap, what are the things that you want the teams to currently work on. With us, with my organizations, we typically also track those things within Jira. And then what are sort of the business outcomes that we need to drive? What are the priorities from the product organization that they need us to work on? And being able to surface all the information that's coming from GitHub, from Jira, from from outputs of what the leadership team is seeing, and being able to get that in front of them, typically within like a deck or something along those lines, and getting the decision from them in terms of, okay, turn it up on this project, or this roadmap item is no longer important based off the information that we're getting from the teams, or based on like the speed that they're going to be able to deliver X, Y, or Z. I think there's tons of value as long as your source is clean as far as the data, and that your priorities are clear from the rest of the business. And then you're able to surface those to the decision makers. So sometimes priorities aren't always clean in terms of, we're going to work on this thing and then that thing. Sometimes you need to work on A and B at the same time. Some things need to be parallelized. Some things need to be sequential. So being able to sort of get the right information in front of people, right data, right progress, right trade-offs, and then facilitate those conversations and facilitate those decisions, so those could then be made and then quickly sort of acted on by the rest of the organization and by the teams.
Got it. So, do you think, for example, you have stated the real use case where teams are having to work on two different projects at the same time. There could be prioritization, reprioritization, or deprioritization, wherein the team is already started to work on the documentation for both the projects, and there is, say, you have to deprioritize one of it. How do you think that is affecting the team, and what do you think could be the best way for the team to adopt when it comes to the futures such similar situations?
I think the biggest thing that we're usually really good at, organizations, we're typically usually good at sort of bubbling up the progress that the teams are making, but sometimes we're not so great in terms of providing the teams the sort of context behind why decisions are being made a certain way. So I think one thing is, as things are getting deprioritized, or as priorities are changing, really trying to make sure you have a communication plan to sort of explain what's the context behind those decisions, and sort of what's the context that would drive sort of future decisions, so people have a better understanding in terms of where the business is sort of heading and what they're thinking about. So I think that's usually the big gap of, we're documenting very well the progress, what's happening with the teams, their velocity, all those metrics, and we're usually good at documenting the decision and making the decision and then acting on it. We're not necessarily good all the time at communicating the why behind the decision. So there almost needs to be, as these decisions are being made, Part of the comms plan is not just relaying the decision, you also have to relay the why behind the decision. So people have kind of a clear understanding of, the context and what's the business thinking? Why are we making this call versus that call? Why was this important 2 years ago is not as important today, sort of thing. So people can kind of, one, have confidence that the thing that they're shifting their focus on right now is really important, and they have an understanding of like what they're working on right now. What is the context of the business? How does that sort of tie to the key initiatives that the business is driving right now?
Got it. Got it. That totally makes sense. So let's move to segment three, where AI's role in agile documentation and reporting plays a big change. So AI is transforming how we document and report on projects. What's your take on how AI is improving agile workflows in specific?
I think the biggest thing that it's doing is, for me, I'll just use me as a
Mm-hmm.
example of as far as like managing agile projects. I've not necessarily, like, at the most tactical level, I've not always been the greatest at like taking action items or taking notes during a call. The with AI and with co-pilots that will integrate either with Microsoft Teams or with Zoom or with Google Meets, etc. It's starting to take some of those tactical things off of your plate, where it's reading the transcript of your call and it's actually capturing the action items of the call, so it's easier to sort of really focus on the meetings that you're having right now. Try to focus on the human beings while the AI is actually taking the notes and the action items and then either emailing or giving you a summary at the end of the call. Human intervention is often still needed. I imagine that's going to become less and less so, but that's just one simple thing that AI has personally, for me, simplified things. I think the other areas where I see AI really improving things is on the documentation front, of being able to index off of all of the documents that have been created and being able to one, find the inconsistencies relatively quickly, be able to collate, like if you have a question about a current project, be able to, put in a quick question of like, what's going on with project X, and then having an AI tool kind of return, this is where it lives in Jira. This is the last progress that was reported on it based off of this document. Really sort of consolidating all the different information to give you like an answer on how things are going with something. And with me, as a manager, I've been onboarding new technical program managers that are coming onto initiatives and projects that already existed, but I don't have that much knowledge of myself. And they'll ask me, well, what is this project? What's the documentation? And I'm able to use the AI tool to basically take that question and put it there. It's like, okay, here are all the documents that are related to this, and this looks like it's the most relative one to your question. So I think AI is going to get better and better at taking all of the different sources that you're using to just run the business, from your meetings, being able to take notes from there, from Jira or whatever tool you're using, track progress, to your documents, and be able to take that whole picture and give you an answer in terms of what's going on, what's the latest on project X, Y, or Z. And so that's just the search function of the business. And then there's just, in terms of documentation, the adding and creation of documentation. So I've been finding it incredibly useful to revisit a process, see where it's out of date, and then easily prompt a GPT to essentially, this is the change that I need to make this process to this document, make those changes, and then it does a good 90-95% job of updating it with very little effort on my side. So the ability for AI to make it easy for you to find things and consolidate and clean, but also be able to add to your data set is incredibly helpful, and especially with documentation. And we're only really at the beginning phases of it really making it easy and cheap to create to create documentation, to create reports, etc. That used to be sort of expensive time wise. Sometimes you would just not do something because it would just take too much time to look at all of the different sources of information, and now AI is making it very easy to just index off of all these different sources to give you a really good comprehensive picture of where things are at in terms of the teams that you're supporting.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. In fact, we at Effilix are doing most of the things that you just mentioned about, say, like capturing all the conversations in one place and summarizing, okay, these are the 10 different conversations your engineering team had during the first half of the month, and this is what the insights and these are the projects they're already working based off those action items. And it also automates the documentation process, documentations, which also means, one, the documentation style which the engineering team generally requires, and two, the documentation which the leadership requires, because all of their requirements are a little different. So we have ensured that there is a sophistication in reporting as well. So my next question would be, how do you think AI can help bridge the gap between engineering teams and business stakeholders in terms of communicating through these documentations?
I think is incredibly good at taking very complex data and then translating it and summarizing it for a sort of layman audience. For instance, one of the things that I was asked to do is I create a deck, always a deck, create a deck that takes the incidents from the past 6 months and line by line gives like a summary that business stakeholders can understand. And first off, like, ooh, 6 months, really? But I was able to download a CSV, upload it into the AI. And I was like, okay, here's the relevant information that I need to pull, and I need you to write a summary that people that do not understand software can understand, like a very basic thing. And its ability to summarize, paragraphs of summaries for like a single incident and then put it down into 1 to 2 sentences that somebody that is not very familiar with software projects or with IT could understand was incredible. It was, and for such a large data set. I mean, there's not a lot of incidents that happen in 6 months, but it's a long time frame, and it's a lot of information to pull for sure. So its ability to sort of pull a large data set and then get very good summaries and translate technical information into something that people that aren't necessarily technical can understand was crucial. And to be honest with you, before AI tools, if somebody was to ask me to do that, I'd probably just tell them either no, or you're going to have to give me a couple weeks on that one. And instead, it took me 15 minutes to do it. And then if, the obvious thing is, okay, you did it for 6 months. We need to have this part of like a regular cadence to check in. Can you do this every week? And again, that would have been a fairly expensive, time-consuming process. And now it's like a 5-minute task of uploading a CSV file and then having it translate. And then just, the human being is just checking, is like, okay, if I wasn't familiar with IT software, would I be able to understand what this incident was about? And the answer is almost always yes. So its ability to index off of complex, sophisticated data, and then be able to summarize and paraphrase for different types of audiences, because you can always change the prompt of like, actually I need to be for very technical people. It can adjust. So it's been incredibly helpful for me to be able to pull large data sets and then ask it to summarize in very simple terms, that they'll help the business actually understand what's going on, where the hot spots, where the problem areas, and be able to actually partner effectively with the engineering team to help us prioritize and make decisions again.
Yeah, that's totally true. And how do you see the accuracy of these AI tools that you're using, and how do you think, or which other areas do you think needs improvement?
I think the first answer is, especially when you first encounter it, is there's a huge wow factor of it's way better than I thought it would be. Um, but then when you start evaluating it a little bit closer, it's like, okay, let's look at these line by line items I've asked it to do. You
Mm-hmm.
find inconsistencies for sure. So the way I've sort of told my team to think of these tools, especially if we're trying to summarize large data sets, is treat your AI tool like a intern, a new intern,
Mm-hmm.
where they're going to do a pretty good job. They're going to save you a lot of time, but definitely check their work, because sometimes there will be inconsistencies for sure. You're still saving a huge amount of time in terms of like whatever you're asking the GPT to do, but you do need to spend that 5 minutes on quality control just to make sure that it's summarizing things accurately, or it's pulling from the right place, um, or etc. So I think that's a piece of advice number one would be definitely be amazed, but check the work. I think piece of advice number two is always let's look at where it's indexing the data and making sure that it's pulling from the right place. So, as technical program managers and as engineering people, let's make sure that our sources of truth are up to date and clean. The analogy that I use, that probably people that I work with are probably tired of, is I have a Roomba in my house, and I have to tell my children, it's like, just because we have a Roomba that vacuums our house, that doesn't mean you just drop things off of the floor and just wait for the Roomba to clean it up. We still have to clean up our our environment to make sure that we're not pulling in bad information. So the second thing is, we still have to make sure that our sources are up to date, that there aren't inconsistencies, and again, you can use AI to help find those inconsistencies, but the human does have to still interject and make sure that it's clean, so it's pulling in the right stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes, if you're new to organization, you won't necessarily have that context or historical information. So it's definitely like the responsibility of the people that have the that tribal knowledge or the experience or with your company to make sure that we're finding those inconsistencies and cleaning them. So you got to avoid the garbage in, garbage out problem with your sources to make sure that that's up to date and clean. Um, I think so. I think those are the two pitfalls. Like you can sometimes be amazed at how good it is that you don't do that quality control to find the problems, and two is you're like, oh, well, this AI tool is so cool and it indexes so greatly that I just don't have to clean my room anymore. And that's definitely not the case. You have to still make sure that the sources are clean and up to date.
Got it, got it. So I'm curious, like, where else do you think AI making a biggest impact in project management today?
I think the the biggest thing, and probably the biggest area for growth, is dealing with, there are all sorts of different tool sets um, that I use to sort of analyze projects, to sort of drive decision making as far as reporting, etc. And there's large opportunities for AI to continue to improve its integrations and start integrating all of those different analytical tools to produce the answer to whatever question that you're trying to get. So I think that probably next 5 or 10 years, you're going to just see more and more integration happening with the AI tools to sort of consolidate and give you more and more accurate information. I think the analytical capabilities of the AI tools on the market today are really good, but there are oftentimes just gaps in terms of the sources because it's not integrated with everything. But that's going to just improve more and more over time, I think. And maybe a point where you don't necessarily need to have all of those different tools, but the AI might be able to start doing some of the analytics that all these other analytical tools are doing. But I think that's one area that is sort of the obvious next step for AI tools, to just integrate more and more with the different business tools. And there's still things that I do on a regular basis that are sort of expensive time-wise, that aren't necessarily like value adds and don't necessarily show up on a job description, but are still really important for me to sort of execute on my job. But they're fairly tedious. They're not easily automated, because there's all sorts of catch-alls and what-ifs and all those things that I think AI will just continue to improve and be able to deal with all of those catch-alls and what-ifs, and be able to streamline more and more sort of the day-to-day work that we're doing, in terms of that sort of takes us away from being with our engineers and facilitating and driving things and surfacing sort of the right level of detail to people, but rather have our heads down trying to do analytical work. I think AI is going to just improve and be able to pull more and more information and be able to surface more and more issues sooner, that I think are going to be really helpful. As well as, being able to build up the program manager's ability to sort of quickly onboard onto new projects, either by looking at all of the existing documentation and getting the sort of typical onboarding, as well as being able to ask GPT just general questions about, hey, there's this new software concept that I'm not familiar with. I don't know, use an example like data lakes. Say you've always been the application layer of software projects, and now you're trying to bone up on your expertise around data platform. ChatGPT will help you in terms of both getting information on what those projects are and what the goals are, etc. But I'll also be able to, I don't understand this concept. Can you explain it to me? So the ability for project managers, program managers, scrum masters, agile coaches, whatever, to go to a new part of the code base and support the project in the typical universal ways, but then being able to learn more and more about the sort of underlying technical details, and learn more and more about the type of software projects you're supporting is going to be really pivotal, in your ability to support, because you're going to be able to learn on the job significantly faster new parts of the software industry that you might not have been in before.
Got it. So that's it. We have come to the end of the episode. In all the episodes, we ask our guests to provide 5 tips either they could use. Our audience could either use it in their personal life or in their professional life. 5 things that you suggest that worked for you and they should try.
I think one is try new things every day with your AI tools, just to see if it works, and then see what doesn't and does. The space is moving and evolving rapidly, so things that you may not think it was capable of doing 6 or 9 or 12 months ago might actually be possible. So try new things, and try old things. So that'd be tip number one. I think tip number two is, real if you're writing something for a really long time, but it's not evergreen, it's probably going to be changing and evolving over time, like a process or something along those lines. Definitely use prompt and prompts to create that documentation. Save yourself time, because you're going to have to probably update that over time anyway, so there's not that much reason to be let's see, be there's not much value in terms of spending a lot of time on documentation anymore. Like, prompt, read what it's written, make the changes that are very specific to your use case. Don't depend on the boilerplate that it produces, and then move on and post. I found that incredibly useful. And then I think third is, if you're trying to look at a large set of data, like if you're looking at a CSV, for instance, upload that and prompt your GPT to try to summarize, to try and consolidate the information and run trends. And you'd be surprised at what the tool is capable of doing. The fourth thing that I use is, I absolutely depend on my co-pilot to record and take notes for me, because that has absolutely always been one of my weaknesses. I'm always trying to focus on the people in the meeting. Those co-pilots are really good at summarizing calls and capturing action items, and it's been huge time saver for me. And then I guess the final tip would be, let me think. I didn't think of 5, did I? This is what I'd usually use a GPT for. It's like, think of 5 tips. Or I'd usually say, actually, if you're trying to generate a bunch of options, prompt it, give me 20, and then you'll typically figure out your 5 right there. But I have used, actually, so I think tip number 5 is, use your GPTs to run ideas. There have been conversations I've needed to prepare for, or there have been reports I've been trying to prepare for, or audiences I've been trying to prepare for. And I've used ChatGPT to basically say, I'm about to meet with a sales executive that's interested in this project. What are some of the things that you think that will be important for that person? It'll help me cater some content that was sort of general or universal, or were very technical, and then I'll be able to, like, well, probably a sales executive is going to care about X, Y, or Z. So I definitely treat your GPT, whatever you're using, as a partner. Bounce ideas off of it, and you'll often get some insights and some ideas that you wouldn't have thought of if you were just trying to think of yourself and try to empathize or think what other people are doing. Because basically it's just indexing, what do sales executives care about? What do they report on? What are the documents that they look at? And then essentially feeds back to you, what's important to them. So treat it as a partner, ask it about different audiences, and it'll help cater and form your communication accordingly.
Got it. Sounds great. John, thanks a lot for sharing your insights. This has been a great discussion on improving documentation, reducing reporting overheads, and using AI to make agile workflows more efficient. Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
And to my audience, if you enjoyed this episode, subscribe to AI in Project Management and Transformation for more interesting and expert conversations. And if you found this useful, share it with your team. Thank you so much, John, once again.
Thank you. It was great talking to you.
You have a wonderful day, and all of you also have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.